They always said I was a sickly child, but no one ever asked why. My childhood smelled like medicine cough syrup, antibiotic pills crushed into pudding, strange herbal teas that made my stomach turn. My mother would stand over me, smile sweetly, and say, "This will help you feel better, baby." But I never did. I just kept getting worse. I missed more school than I attended, always dizzy, always pale, always sensitive to food. Doctors ran tests. None of them found anything. Mom said I had a weak constitution. Everyone believed her. So did I. Until one day I didn't. I was 12 when I started asking questions. Why did no other kid drink sleep tea every night? Why did I only feel better when I was away from home? And why did the tea taste different when Mom was angry? Something was always in my cup. She never drank from it. Never let me prepare it. Never let anyone else serve me. She insisted, "Only I know what keeps you healthy." And like a good daughter, I believed her until my body stopped listening. I began to vomit blood. It happened on a Sunday morning. I remember the taste metallic and bitter. I collapsed on the kitchen floor. My father screamed. My mother didn't. She just whispered, "She's always been fragile." The hospital ran more tests. They thought it was ulcers, maybe anemia, maybe internal inflammation. But I heard one doctor whisper, "Something's not right. Her blood work shows toxins." And that word stuck in my mind. Toxins. I didn't know it yet. But my body had been screaming the truth for years. And someone with a soft voice and cruel hands had been silencing it, drop by drop. After I got out of the hospital, my mother brought me flowers. Pink carnations, wrapped in brown paper. She placed them by my bed and whispered, "You scared me, baby. You need to take better care of yourself." But I was the one being cared for, wasn't I? She made me a smoothie banana, almond, a dash of something I didn't recognize. She said it would restore my strength. I took one sip. My throat burned, my vision blurred slightly. But she smiled like everything was fine. "Good girls finish their smoothies," she said. My body said no, but my mind still trusted her. That's the danger, isn't it, when harm comes dressed in love? When the hand that hurts you is the same hand that brushes your hair and tells you you're special. I kept a notebook. At first, it was just to track the pain. When it happened, what I ate, what Mom gave me. Then I began noticing a pattern. Herbal teas before bedtime, or nausea. Smoothies, dizziness. Anything she personally prepared. Yes, foggy brain tremors. I showed the notebook to my Aunt A, kind woman, Mom's sister. She frowned. Said maybe I was imagining it. Said my mother had always been a little intense, but loving. Don't make accusations, she warned. Family is complicated. And just like that, the door closed again. Mom brought me warm milk that night. I didn't drink it. I pretended to. She sat by my bed and stroked my hair. "You'd die without me," she whispered softly. "You know that, right?" And I remember thinking, or maybe I'll die because of you. But mine did. It came in cups, bowls, and smiles, in careful measurements of quiet destruction. And the scariest part, I still wanted to believe she meant well. I was 14 the first time I disobeyed her. Really disobeyed her. That night she handed me a cup. "Lavender tea," she said. For sleep, she smiled. I held it in my hands. It was warm, smelled sweet, almost too sweet. She waited for me to drink. I nodded, brought it to my lips, and excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the door and stared at the cup. The steam curled into the air. It looked innocent, like everything else she gave me. But this time, I didn't drink it. I poured it slowly, carefully down the drain. And I flushed the toilet so she'd hear a sound and think I followed the rules. Back in bed, I pretended to sleep. I kept one eye open. She came in later, quiet like a shadow. She leaned close, watched me breathing. "Gimme." Then whispered, "Good girl, always obedient." But I wasn't obedient, not anymore. And that small act of defiance felt huge, like a secret victory. The next morning, I didn't feel sick. No dizziness, no pain. Just hunger, real hunger. For truth, for answers, for freedom. I started collecting things, labels from bottles, crumbs from capsules, even drops of tea saved in cotton. I didn't know what I was building, but I knew one day I'd need evidence. Because one day I would leave. Nobody saw me pour that tea. Nobody praised me. Nobody knew. But it was the first time I chose survival over obedience. And deep down, I think she knew something had changed. The thing about manipulative mothers is, they don't just punish you with pain, they punish you with guilt. You never finish what I make anymore. She said that while serving me soup. Her eyes wide, glassy, her voice just above a whisper. Do you think I'd ever hurt you? I froze, because deep down, I didn't know how to answer that anymore. She pulled out old photo albums. She pointed to baby pictures. Me in her arms. Me with a bandage. Me looking sick, always sick. I saved you, she whispered. Every time you were weak, I brought you back. She looked at me like a wounded animal, and then she said something that chilled me to my core. If anything ever happened to you, I don't think I could survive it. She turned herself into the victim. Suddenly, I was the dangerous one, the ungrateful child, the one who doubted a mother's love. Every moment I refused her drink, she cried more. Every meal I skipped, she got weaker. It messed with my mind. I started questioning myself again. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe she's just overprotective. Maybe I'm the one hurting her now. It's terrifying when you don't trust your body. But it's even worse when you don't trust your mind. I hid books in my room, medical books, psychology articles I printed from the school computer lab. I learned about Munchausen by proxy, a syndrome where a caregiver causes illness in someone else to gain attention, control, or sympathy. It was like reading my life on the page, and suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. My truth had a name. She didn't need chains. She didn't need threats. All she needed was guilt, and I carried that weight every single day. There's a moment in every survivor's story when they try to speak up. Mine came on a rainy Wednesday in the school library. I trusted my biology teacher, Mrs. Holloway. Soft voice, warm smile. She once brought me crackers when I fainted during class. I stayed after school, pretended to need help with homework. And then I broke. I told her everything, not in order, not clearly. Just bits and pieces. The tease. The sickness. The notebooks. The way Mom watched me drink. The guilt. The whisper, you'd die without me. Mrs. Holloway listened, but her expression slowly changed. She wasn't shocked. She was confused. Are you sure, Dorothy? Maybe your mom just worries too much? She's probably doing her best. And just like that, everything inside me collapsed. I nodded and said, maybe you're right. Because it was easier than trying to explain the invisible. That night, I tore pages from my notebook. I flushed them. All the patterns, the evidence, the pain, gone. And I cried in silence until my pillow was soaked. But something changed anyway. I started hiding the pills she gave me, spitting out the teas, swapping her food with plain oatmeal when I could. And the most miraculous thing happened. I began to feel, normal, for the first time in years. Then Mom noticed she didn't scream. She didn't hit me. She just stood by my bed one night and said, "You've been looking better lately. That must mean you don't need me anymore." And then she smiled, but her eyes were empty. Sometimes it brings silence, doubt, a deeper loneliness. But deep down, I knew what I felt was real. And now I had no choice but to fight quietly. It happened by accident. A mistake. A single sip from the wrong cup. And everything began to unravel. My cousin Sophie came to stay. She was 16, bright, loud, curious. The kind of girl who asked too many questions and never accepted silence as an answer. She was only supposed to stay the weekend. Mom made us tea that Friday night, the same routine. 2 cups, one for me, one for Sophie. But something distracted her in the kitchen. The phone rang. She turned her back, and Sophie grabbed my cup. "Ooh, this one smells better," she laughed. "You always get the good stuff." I didn't have time to stop her. She took a long sip. Her face changed. Ugh, bitter. She set it down, shrugged. But 30 minutes later, her stomach cramped. She got dizzy. She ran to the bathroom and threw up. Mom looked shocked, too shocked. She ran to Sophie, held her hair, rubbed her back. But I was watching from the hallway, and her hands were trembling. Not with worry, but with something else. Fear, guilt. Sophie said something I'll never forget. I've never reacted to tea like that before. "What kind of herbs does your mom use?" I didn't answer, but my heart was pounding. That night, I stayed awake until 3 a.m. I replayed everything. Her reactions, Sophie's symptoms, my own years of sickness. This was the first time someone else had felt it. Not me. Not in my head. Not imaginary. Real. For years, I'd been searching for proof. And now, by pure accident, my mother had poisoned the wrong girl. And there was no going back. I didn't throw out the tea. When Sophie went to bed and Mom was cleaning the kitchen, I quietly took the cup she had sipped from. I poured what was left into a small glass jar I found in the garage. Then I wrapped it in 2 layers of foil and hid it in the back of our basement freezer behind bags of frozen peas. It sat there, like a secret weapon. One day I thought someone will test it. One day I'll have the courage to hand it over. But until then, I had to survive. I started researching quietly on the school computers, on the library's network. I read about toxic herbs, household substances that can mimic illness. Things like digitalis, oleander, heavy metals in tea leaves, antihistamines crushed into warm drinks, and even antifreeze disguised with honey and lemon. I couldn't tell what was in mine yet, but I knew it wasn't just love. Then something terrifying happened. Mom started noticing I was more alert, stronger, eating better, asking fewer questions. I thought I was hiding it well. Until one evening, she brought me a new cup. I added a little something different tonight, she smiled. You've been getting so strong. I thought I'd help you rest better. I froze. I couldn't hide my fear this time. That night, I didn't pour the tea out, I saved it too. Now I had 2 samples, and in my journal I wrote, if I don't wake up tomorrow, tell them to test the tea. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about evidence, about catching her, about truth. And I wasn't the sick girl anymore. I was the girl with a freezer full of secrets. I waited until a Saturday morning when my mother went to the market. I took one of the jars from the freezer, wrapped it in paper towels, and stuffed it inside my school backpack. My hands were shaking the whole way. I didn't go to the police. I didn't go to a doctor. I walked 3 blocks to a tiny pharmacy run by an older man named Mr. Halbrook. He had been there for decades. People said he was kind and quiet. That's what I needed. He was surprised to see me. Dorothy, isn't it? You okay? I nodded, then shook my head. I pulled out the jar, unwrapped it slowly, and whispered, Can you tell me what's in this? He looked confused. Is it medicine? No, I said. It's tea from my mom. I think she's been putting things in it. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He took the jar in silence, held it to the light. I'm not a chemist, he said. But I can run some basic tests for common substances. Just between us. Then he added, if I find anything dangerous, you'll have to tell someone. You understand? I nodded. My throat was too tight for words. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. What if she found out? What if he told her? What if I was wrong? He called me 2 days later, asked if I could come back alone. I did. He sat me down, closed the door, looked me in the eye, and said, there were traces of barbiturates. It's a sedative strong enough to make someone sick over time. My stomach dropped. You weren't imagining it, he added. This could seriously harm someone. Even kill them if misused. No more guessing, no more maybe. She was drugging me on purpose. And now, someone else knew. When I left Mr. Halbrook's pharmacy, my legs felt like jelly. I held the test results tight in my hand. My whole world had just shifted. It wasn't just a fear anymore. It was proof. But I couldn't show it to anyone. Not yet. If I went to the police, what if they didn't believe me? What if they thought it was just a teenager trying to frame her mother? I needed more. So I did the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. I went home and pretended I didn't know a thing. That night she served me soup, just like always. She smiled sweetly. Her eyes never left mine. You're such a good girl, Dorothy. Always so calm lately. Sleeping better, too. I nodded, sipped water, not the soup. My hands were trembling under the table. But then, her voice changed. You've been spending time with that old pharmacist, haven't you? I froze. What did he say to you? I looked up. Her face wasn't angry. It was curious, almost amused. Did he tell you something scary? Something to make you think I'm hurting you? She reached across the table and touched my hand. People love drama, Dorothy, especially lonely old men. That was the moment I knew. She knew. She knew I was onto her. And she wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to apologize, or cry, or even lie anymore. Now it was a game, a test. Who would act first? I packed a bag that night, just a small one. Cash I'd hidden, test results. A burner phone Mr. Halbrook had secretly given me. I tucked it under my bed, ready for the day I'd have to run. The walls of that house were no longer just suffocating. They were watching. And now, the woman who raised me was waiting to see if I'd crack. But she underestimated one thing. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I remember the storm that night. Rain lashed against the windows like the house itself wanted to scream. But it wasn't the thunder that kept me up. It was her footsteps, pacing, slow, deliberate. Then, the creak of my door. She walked in, no tea, no tray, just her, and silence. She sat on the edge of my bed. "Dorothy," she whispered, "why are you trying to hurt me?" I didn't answer. She reached out, touched my cheek gently. Then suddenly, sleepy. My head snapped sideways. Shock, pain. Not because it hurt, but because it was the first time she didn't pretend anymore. Her voice cracked. "I gave you everything. I kept you alive when your father didn't want you. I held your hair when you were sick. Even when I was sick." Her voice wasn't human anymore. It was something broken. "And this is how you repay me. Sneaking around, talking to strangers, hiding food." She grabbed my wrist tight, too tight. And then she shoved me. Hard. I hit the wall. Books crashed. A glass jar shattered near my feet. But that broken jar changed everything because it was one of the tea jars I had saved. And from the smell alone, that bitter chemical stink, even she knew what it meant. She stared at it, then back at me. Our eyes locked. No words. Just truth hanging in the air like poison. I ran out the door, into the storm. Barefoot, bleeding, but alive. I didn't stop running until I reached the pharmacy. Mr. Halbrook didn't ask questions. He took one look at me and said, "Call the police." And this time I didn't stop him. She had crossed a line, and so had I. I had chosen to fight back, even if it meant losing everything. The police came quickly. The rain hadn't stopped. I sat there in the pharmacy, soaked and shivering, wrapped in a blanket Mr. Halbrook gave me. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female. They looked concerned, but not convinced. "You say your mother's been poisoning you?" I nodded. They looked at each other. The female officer took notes. The male one asked more questions. "Do you have proof? Has a doctor confirmed anything? Any witnesses?" My voice was shaking. "I have tea samples," I said. "And a pharmacist who found barbiturates in them." They asked for the pharmacist. Mr. Halbrook came forward, firm, clear. "She's not making this up. I ran preliminary tests. And there's something in those drinks no child should ever ingest." Still, they hesitated. I ran upstairs and grabbed the last jar. It was hidden under my clothes in the freezer. I placed it in a Ziploc bag and gave it to them with both hands. "Please," I said, "if you don't believe me, test this. Just test it." Days passed. I was placed in temporary custody with a foster family. It was quiet, too quiet. I kept waiting for a knock on the door, for someone to tell me I made a mistake, that Mom wanted me back, that she missed me, but the knock never came. Then a call. One of the detectives rang the foster home. They'd run tests. Barbiturates, consistent doses, over weeks, months, enough to cause long-term harm. And it matched what was in my blood. That changed everything. Suddenly people believed me. Social workers, prosecutors. Even the school counselor who once told me, "Your mother just worries too much." Now she avoided my eyes. Words weren't enough. Tears weren't enough. But truth can cut through doubt like a scalpel. And finally, someone saw me for what I was. A survivor, not a liar. The courtroom smelled like old paper and anxiety. It was cold, too clean, too bright. I sat at the witness stand, hands folded tightly, staring at the woman who once rocked me to sleep. She didn't look like a monster. She wore a gray dress, her hair tied back, no makeup. She looked like someone's aunt, not like someone who spent years slowly poisoning her child in silence and smiles. The prosecution laid it all out, the tea samples, the blood tests, the pharmacy logs, my medical records, years of fatigue, confusion, tremors. The puzzle pieces finally fit, and then they played something, a recording. It was my own voice, a desperate voicemail I had left Mr. Halbrook the night I ran. "If anything happens to me, please show them the jars." I think she's trying to finish what she started. The courtroom went still. Even the jury leaned forward. The defense tried to twist everything. She's a troubled teen. She had vivid imagination. She misinterpreted a mother's concern for control. But I held my ground. She told me I ruined her life, I said. So she decided to ruin mine slowly. The hardest part. when I looked into the gallery and saw 2 of my old teachers sitting there. They were crying. They believed me now, but I had needed them then. Before leaving the stand, I whispered, "I forgive you, Mom, but I will never protect your silence again." She looked away. That was the last time I saw her. I was no longer the sick girl, no longer the problem child. I was Dorothy Elaine Parker, and for the first time, the world knew the truth. 3 weeks later, I sat in the back of the courtroom as the judge read her sentence aloud. For intentional poisoning of a minor, with the intent to cause bodily harm over an extended period of time. I hereby sentence you to 12 years in state prison. I didn't cry. She barely blinked. There was no gasp, no apology, no begging for mercy. Only silence. The courtroom emptied slowly, reporters whispered. Family members shifted uncomfortably. I stayed behind for just a moment longer. And in that quiet, I allowed myself something dangerous. A breath, not of joy, not of revenge, but of release. Back at my foster home, the world hadn't changed. Birds still chirped. Trains still roared in the distance. The sun still set at 6:45 that spring. But I had changed. I started eating again. Smiling without looking over my shoulder. Writing in my journal for me, not for survival. And I even began to dream again. Not nightmares. Real dreams. And therapy helped week by week. I learned words like trauma, bond gaslighting, chronic fear conditioning. I learned how to rebuild a life that wasn't made of glass. One day my therapist asked, "Do you hate her?" I paused. And then I said, "No, I think she was already broken. Long before she broke me." The court gave me a sentence, but healing gave me a future. And for the first time in years, the voice in my head wasn't hers. It was mine. A year after the sentencing, I stood on a small stage at a local community center. The room was quiet. People of all ages, men, women, even teens, watched me as I stepped up to the microphone. My palms were sweaty, but my voice was steady. My name is Dorothy Elaine Parker, and I survived being poisoned by my own mother for 5 years. Gasps, tears. One woman clutched her chest. But no one looked away. I spoke for 20 minutes. I told the truth. Not just the facts, but the feelings. The doubt. The loneliness. The terrifying loyalty to someone who was killing me. And I ended with this. If you feel unsafe in your own home, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you deserve to be believed. I started writing first blog posts, then guest columns, eventually a memoir. Silent Tea, How I Survived the Poison in My Own Home. It wasn't a bestseller, but it reached inboxes. It landed in school libraries. It became part of training seminars for social workers. And then came the letters from girls, from grown women, from boys who said, "I thought I was the only one." Some had similar stories, some had worse, but all of them said the same thing. "Thank you for speaking." Because I couldn't. I became more than what was done to me, not just the poisoned girl, not just the broken child, but a voice, a bridge, a sign that says, you can get out, you can rebuild, you can heal. They took years from me, but they didn't take my voice. And now that I've found it, I won't let it go. Now I sit in my garden gray hair, tied back a steaming cup of tea beside me, real tea, the kind that soothes, not silences. My granddaughter runs barefoot through the grass, laughing like I used to before everything changed. She calls me Nana Dot, and sometimes she asks, "Why do you always hold me so tight?" And I tell her, because I know what it's like not to be held when it matters most. I wrote everything down so that no girl ever has to wonder if she's crazy for feeling unsafe in her own home. So that no adult ever says, she's just dramatic. And someday when my granddaughter is old enough to understand, I'll hand her the book and say, this is your family's history, but it's not your legacy. Your legacy is love, safety, strength. I forgave my mother not for her sake, but for mine. Because I couldn't carry her darkness into the light I wanted to build for my future. And now I live with peace, real peace. Not silence, not fear, but the kind that comes from speaking the truth and still choosing love over bitterness. To anyone listening, if you feel something isn't right, trust that small voice inside you. That whisper that says, this is not love. You are not imagining things. You are not broken, and you are not alone. If a girl who was poisoned for years can rise, speak love again, then so can you. This is Dorothy Elaine Parker, and this was my story. Thank you for listening.